Hi, and welcome to our second video on fractions in the number section. So what we're going to do here is look at fractions of amounts and kind of two types of questions, just using your skills with fractions. The first one, what we're going to do is look at how we can describe amounts using fractions, and then in the second section we'll look at finding fractions of amounts. And I know those two things sound kind of basically the same, but there is a bit of a difference between them. So one thing at a time, here we go. So the first kind of thing is just being able to express proportions or amounts as fractions. So what we've got there is a rectangle, and we've just got to write down what fraction of the rectangle has been shaded purple. So what we're going to do is look at it, say, well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 3, so that's 18 squares. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 purple ones. So our answer would be 6 over 18. Now, 6 over 18 is fine as a fraction, but it might be you get a question where that might be not one of those, because what we can do is write it as an equivalent fraction, which is the same size fraction but just with smaller numbers. And if you remember from the previous video, what we're going to do is use the golden rule, which is do the same for the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the top by 6, I'm going to divide the bottom by 6, so I'm doing the same to the top and the bottom, and so actually I've got 1/3 of the rectangle has actually been shaded in. Now, depending on the question you get given, it's the 11 plus tends to be multiple choice. So it might be you might get given that as an option, but it might be you're not given that one, you're actually given the simplified version. So it's useful to be able to change it from this kind of unsimplified one to this one, which we describe as being in its simplest form. Basically, same size fraction, but with the numbers as small as we can make them. Okay, so there we go. We've got 1/3 of that rectangle is purple. On we go. So there's a piece of wood, and I've chopped off 2/5. So how much have I got left? And this is just making sure that you're comfortable with fractions adding up to wholes. So we can say that one whole would be 5/5. There they all are along the bottom here. Clearly there's my 2/5. So hopefully you're happy that I've cut off 2/5. I'm going to have 3/5 left. 1, 2, 3/5. Okay, moving on. Next question. This one's a little bit more difficult than the last one. So we've got 3/7 of the pupils in a class of boys, and there's 12 boys in the class. So how many pupils are in there in total? So here we go. So 3/7 of the class are boys, and there's 12 boys. So there you go. There's my 12 boys, and that represents 3/7 of the whole class. So if 12 boys is 3/7, then 1/7 is just going to be kind of essentially a third of that. So hopefully we can see that 1/7 there is 4 boys. So that means that if I want the whole class, I'm going to need another, I've got 3/7, I'm going to need another 4/7. So I'm going to need, there we go, there's my girls. So another 7th there, a 7th there, a 7th there, and a 7th there. So in total what I've got is 28 children in the class, because I've got 7 7ths, and in each 7th there's 4 children. Essentially that one works just by figuring out what 1/7 is and then multiplying up from there. Okay, and on we go. So here comes a fraction question that's kind of linked into one about interpreting data. So we've got a bar chart about people's favourite sports, and we're saying, well, what fraction of the children asked about their favourite sports said that cricket was their favourite? So the first thing we need to know is, well, how many children got asked in total? So let's have a look and say, well, we've got 16 said netball, we've got 24 said cricket, we've got 20 said football, so we need to add up 16, 24 and 20, so we can work out straight from our bar chart that we've got 60 children were asked. And we already said that 24 of them, there they are, said cricket. So 24 out of the 60 said that cricket was their favourite. And again, similar to on the last slide, we can do a bit of dividing, and what we need to look for is a number that will divide into both of those. And I'm just going to jump straight to the biggest number I can think of that will divide into 24 and into 60 is 12. So I'm going to do a divide by 12 on the top and bottom. And divide by 12 I get 2, divide by 12 I get 5, so that's 2/5 of the children said that cricket was their favourite sport. So those 4 questions were all slightly different, but all to do with describing amounts using fractions. Let's move on and think about how we can find fractions of amounts, and hopefully once we've gone through these next couple of slides you'll see the difference between the two types of question. So here we go. So find 2/5 of £15. So there we go. There's my £15. And the first thing I've got to do is figure out what 1/5 of £15 is. So what I'm going to do is take my big chunk of coins there, and I'm going to split them into 5 equal piles. There we go, because I've gone for 5 piles because I'm working with fifths. So each of these stacks here now represents 1/5 of 15. So we can say that 1/5 of 15 is 3. Now, the question's asking us to work out what is 2/5. And so what essentially I'm going to need is, I'm going to need 2 of these piles. So I'm going to pick these 2 here, so 2 piles. So that's 2 lots of 3. So that's going to be 6 coins. So we can say that 2/5 of 15 is 6. Now, that question, we did it by using diagrams, and I did it by splitting up piles of coins. And obviously it's sat in an exam, you're not going to be able to sit there and draw out loads of coins and start moving them around in the way I can on the computer. So we need a way to be able to figure out this just by doing a calculation. And if you have a look at the 2 things that we did, the first thing we did was said, well, let's first of all take our amount here, it was 15, and divide it by the bottom number. So we did a divide by 5 to figure out how many were in each pile. And then the second thing says, well, you know, if I know how many's in each pile, in this case I wanted 2 piles. So what I then did essentially was times it by the top number. So that process of divide by the bottom number and then follow that with a times by the top number is how essentially we're going to work out fraction of amounts. So here we go again. Another one, slightly more difficult numbers. So we've got 7/9 of 54. I remember we said the first thing we said was divide by the bottom number. So I've got to do 54 divided by 9, which is 6. And what I'm doing there is finding out what 1/9 is worth, which is 6. And then the next step of the calculation is to say, okay, let's times it by the top number. So I need to take my 1/9, which is 6. I need to find 7/9. So I need 7 of these. So I've got to do 7 times 6, 7 lots of 1/9, which is 42.